Well, thank you everyone for joining today. We have a very exciting discussion as we're wrapping up the month of November and moving into December. November is Men's Mental Health Month. So we're very excited today to be joined by Dr. Aaron Karpman, who is going to be talking to us about this very important topic. Um, but first, my name is Kyle Warren. I'm the Client Success Manager here at Maru Health. I've personally found great benefit from exploring my mental health, especially after continuously being the stereotypical guy who is trying to avoid talking about his own mental health. It's really worked wonders for me, and I appreciate that in my current job at Maru Health, I have the opportunity to extend that help to those who need it on a really broad scale. So enough about me. We're going to move on to the man of the hour here. Dr. Aaron Karpman is a licensed clinical psychologist and also a Maru Health therapist. He's worked over the course of his career in a wide variety of clinical settings, from outpatient clinics to psychiatric hospitals. He's currently working in juvenile justice, which is really fascinating, and I think he'll discuss that a little bit more throughout the webinar today. He works primarily across a wide range of clinical modalities, including cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamics. When he's not working, he enjoys spending time with his family and hiking through the Sierra Nevadas. Dr. Karpman is our clinical expert on men's mental health, and I'm super excited to have him here with us today. So, Dr. Karpman, I'm going to pass it over to you, who's going to share a bit about our agenda and get us moving along.
Kyle, thanks for that introduction. That was awesome. And I think, as men and women, as people, we're all sort of in the role of experts on what it is to be a man in this society. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. I just wanted to share this picture. This is me and a friend of mine. We do a lot of hikes in the mornings, and that's part of mental health, is just spending time outside, doing things that we love sometimes. So, but I'm honored to be here for the month of November, Men's Mental Health Month. Who knew? Here's sort of what we're going to talk about today. The problem with men's mental health is there's a lot of stigma to it. So we'll go over the stigma and just give you some examples of the stigma that gets in the way of our health. There's this stigma, and I'm going to try not to say a lot of so we'll see how many times I say I'm going to try to catch myself. There's these stigmas, there's this barrier, this anti-mental health. There it is. We'll see. Anyway, I got to let it go. But the stigmas of mental health prevent us from getting health. We often will tough it out and force ourselves, to pick ourselves up from our bootstraps, because we don't want to look bad. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want the stigma of mental health to affect us or our job or our loved ones. So I'll discuss the stigma, and then as well as the cost of the stigma. So avoiding treatment, like any illness, if you avoid treatment and therapy, you suffer longer. So we'll spend some time talking about the suffering that I think all men in our society undergo because we're biased against getting mental health. Then I'll open it up for discussion with the participants, and we'll also, before that, we'll do a QA. Kyle and I will do kind of a QA, and any questions he comes up with, or some questions that we might want to talk about to add to the solution. So I'm going to talk about the stigma and the problem and the cost of the stigma, and then hopefully some solutions. And then I'd love any audience participation, anyone that wants to share any questions or stories or anecdotes or even their idea of the solution, because I think we're all in this together as men in November, and just in our lives. We don't need to suffer any more than we already have, as that Marlboro man, as that tough man that dies of cigarettes and cancer or substance abuse. There's so much cost to it. So I'll go over the cost before we go all the way through this, though. Anyone that has any food or has access to getting food, at the end of this exercise, we're going to do a mindfulness eating exercise. Just a cool way to help. Mindfulness is a great way to deal with mental health issues, and it's proven to really help with anxiety and depression. So if anyone can get access to any food, in the next 20 minutes or so, we'll try to do an exercise, if I can mindfully remember that, because I didn't make a slide for it. So that's our presentation in a nutshell, and I'm honored to be here with you guys. Here's a slide. I tried to get some current media to highlight mental health issues. This is Anthony Bourdain, who was a very famous chef and passionate person that struggled with mental health issues. And, I don't know personally how many of these celebrities that I used for this got therapy, but I know that they struggled with the stigma. You want to be tough. You want to take care of it yourself. So here's a quote from Anthony Bourdain. And he says, I understand that there's a guy inside me who wants to lay in bed, smoke weed all day, watch cartoons, old movies, and my life is a whole series of stratagems to avoid and outwit that guy. I don't know if any of the men or even women, and a lot of this applies to men and women. I mean, the stigma is across the board for mental health. You know, there's still a huge stigma, but I just related so much to this quote. And unfortunately, Anthony Bourdain did die from mental health issues. So jump in anytime too. If anyone puts any questions in the chat, just feel free to put them in. And I love an interactive presentation. So if there are questions, I'm happy to just kind of stop and answer questions as we go along. So thank you. Excellent. Let's see. I tried to use men that are considered men's men, but also struggle with mental health. Like The Rock, he's a man's man. We think of him, you know, he's tough, he's strong, but he also has depression. Here's a quote that I love from The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. I found that with depression, one of the most important things that we realize is that you're not alone in it. You're not the first to go through it, and you're not going to be the last to go through it. And I think that applies to all of men's mental health. You know, we're not alone in this. How many times as a man do you feel like you're alone and you're all by yourself? Maybe you have less social support, or maybe you have a big family around you and you're just kind of hiding out what's really going on inside. But I think it's important to know that we're not alone in it. And this presentation, this discussion that we're having is my attempt to try to reach out and connect with people that feel like they have to go at it alone, because I just don't think we should suffer needlessly. And here's the stigma. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the stigma of mental health and how that causes so much suffering. You know, imagine walking around like that. And that's what mental health can feel like you're just carrying this giant ball and chain. So here's a personal example of stigma. And this was so funny. This all came up. It's not funny, haha, but it's just interesting example that came up while I was preparing for this presentation over the last, you know, I've been kind of thinking about this all month, and I have a family member that's actually with me right now. And she's dealing with cancer. It's not the worst cancer in the world, but it's cancer. It's hard. And she's doing okay, but she's been suffering from it. And she's depressed and she's anxious and she's staying in her bed sometimes. She's having difficulty sleeping. My wife and I are talking to her. We're both therapists. I'm married to an MFT. So we got two therapists in the house, and somebody's suffering from depression and anxiety due to cancer. So you would almost think there'd be less stigma, right? It's the cancer. It's not like something's wrong with my head, which I think a lot of us, you know, are struggling when it comes to mental health, that it's our head that's wrong because we take that so personally. Back to the stigma. But so she's suffering from cancer. She's suffering from the depression and the anxiety too, because you can have cancer and travel the world. You can have cancer and love your family and go to movies and eat well and sleep well and take care of yourself, or you can have cancer and you can spend all night feeling depressed and thinking about death. So there's like a healthy version of cancer and a less healthy version. And right now, this family member is dealing with sort of a less healthy relationship with her cancer. My wife and I try to convince her, you know, you could just talk to somebody, get some help. And, you know, she had like a Valium or something left over from a previous treatment or something that she had once had. And she took it and she went to bed that night and slept great and went for a hike with us in the morning. It just felt like $1,000,000. And she's like, you know, if I could just talk to somebody like a psychiatrist and maybe get a little bit of medication to help me sleep and deal with some of the anxiety, because it's short term. So, I mean, it's really the perfect situation where some short-term Valium and maybe talk therapy would be, you know, or even something like Mary with some mindfulness. I mean, this could be perfect for her, right? Two therapists in the house. You know, you think, okay, so we can convince this person, right? Guess what happened? Here's a little song, right, from the 90s. I'm not crazy. I won't try to sing it, but I'm not crazy. I'm just a little unwell. So this, I won't punish you guys, but here's where it went. The stigma. My family member will not see a therapist. She does not. She's not crazy. This is what she says. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I don't need to see a psychiatrist. I'm not that bad. I'm not that crazy. Only crazy people see therapists. So this idea of crazy is so detrimental. And this is an example of a woman. I mean, I don't know this is meant, but it's across the board. It's the stigmas for everybody. So yeah, with the stigma, she doesn't want to see anybody. She won't see a therapist. She won't see a psychiatrist. She tried to convince the oncologist to prescribe her for some anti-anxiety medication. And the guy's like, I don't do that. You have to see a psychiatrist. Were you unmuting yourself for a minute, Kyle?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that that's something I definitely see amongst my family as well. People that are trying to deal with a variety of issues or circumstantial things that are difficult to manage. And it's like they know the resources that are out there, but they can't make that breakthrough to actually take the step into getting care because of that idea that there's this thought that, oh, if you're going to therapy, then there's really something wrong with you. And that's just not the case. I mean, everyone has something they're trying to deal with. Therapy is a solution. We don't dismiss, if you are trying to like lose weight, you wouldn't dismiss the idea of like going on a diet or seeing a nutritionist. And it's kind of like the same comparison. So just wanted to add to that I see very similar things in my own, circle.
And I like that example, with weight loss, because it's so concrete, right? If you broke your arm, like you wouldn't put it off, and oh, it'll get better on its own. You would go get treatment. So it's this. I think it's a great way to look at mental health issues. If you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're not sleeping, why suffer? Why try to tough it out? So yeah, I love that example, and it's interesting. So this example happens in real time, and as I'm doing this presentation, and I give you this example, and my mother-in-law, she won't get the help, and my wife and I talk to her some more. It was actually kind of brought up because I was doing this presentation, so we were having another conversation, and we actually brought up like the stigma, and it was so cool because she was a little more open to it. So maybe that's one way through it too, is to even name it, to just name that, I think you're avoiding help because of the stigma. I think maybe that might be a way to kind of get through it. So she hasn't seen a therapist yet, but she seems more open to the idea, and she even brought up, she's like, when I was growing up, no one saw therapists. It wasn't done. So here's another perspective, and this kind of ties into what Kyle was saying too. And I like this picture too. It's a dude being a bro to himself, and sometimes we have to embrace ourselves, and that's okay to say. I mean, that's we have to learn that that's not necessarily flowery or whatever. It's okay to just love yourself and to be good to yourself. I think as a man we have to think that that's manly. That it's okay to be a man that writes in a journal, or a man that has feelings, or a man that talks to a therapist, and that can still be manly. That's the work that I think we're trying to do, is to reframe what it is to be manly. And that'll lead into the second conversation that we're going to have, which is about masculinity and machismo and all that. But another perspective, to go back to the stigma, instead of anxiety and depression, someone with a broken arm or a broken wrist or a sprained ankle or any sort of physical abnormality that's bothering them, how would they react? If you broke or sprained yourself or hurt yourself, would you say, I can tough it out, or it's not bad, or it'll get better on its own, or I just need to be a man about it? I mean, I don't know that many men that will walk around with a broken arm, because it's not a lot of breaks. A lot of things aren't going to just heal on their own either. And that's the same with mental health too. Not all mental health issues magically heal on their own. And even if they could heal on their own, like let's say you sprained your ankle and you could get through it in 12 to 18 months, but if you saw somebody you could get over it in 3 months, wouldn't you want to get better sooner? Why suffer? Why is it manly to suffer and to be unhappy? I think that's an important question. Why have we decided that it's manly to hurt? And here's a good quote for hurting. Men who do not face their own pain are often prone to inflict it on others. So if we're suffering, if we're a man, we think we're the only ones suffering by ourselves. But when we snap at our wife or our partner or our child or our coworkers, maybe they're suffering too with us now. We're not just the only ones to suffer. So here's the second problem, is toxic masculinity. So think about like advertisements like the Marlboro Man and just all that we glorify as being manly, machismo, manliness. We're not emotional. We don't express feelings except anger. It's okay to be angry. You could be angry, but you can't be sad. You can't be surprised. You can't be scared. Men don't get scared. Men don't get remorseful or tearful. We dominate. We're aggressive. we tend to be stereotypically homophobic, if you will, the alpha male, conquering the female, conquering our work. We never cry. We don't show compassion. We no other emotions are allowed. Sexual preferences, you have to be a straight male dominating females. This is all what makes a man, right? I mean, this is stereotypically, this is, I think, how we see men. And I think it's to our own peril. Asking for help is a weakness. Before smartphones, sometimes I'd get lost, and who wants to ask for help when you're lost? That's not manly. So we struggle, we suffer, we drive around in circles metaphorically because we are afraid to ask for help. And this leaves us with less support, less connections, and to needless suffering. I'm hammering my point down. And here's a real person, a real man, and then behind him, all the things that he's told he has to be. He has to be strong, athletic, virile, muscular, don't cry. Here's the cost of and the term that I'm giving it is toxic masculinity. And I like the word toxic masculinity because being masculine isn't necessarily in itself a bad thing. I'm not here to say that it's bad to be manly. It's great. If you want to go work out and sweat and be strong and feel like a man and, box and do some manly stuff, that's awesome. And that's more power to you. But if that's the only thing you can do is be the manly stuff and never let in things that you consider less manly, I think we get trapped. I like to look at feelings kind of like mad, glad, sad, afraid. It's this wheel. And if you're stuck on one part of the wheel, then you can't move around freely. So I just want to open up that men can be more than just one thing. And here's the cost of this. We have worse depression. We have a suicide rate 4 times higher than that of women. Substance abuse is off the chart compared to women. 62,000 men die of alcohol abuse versus 26,000 women. We are 3 times more likely to use drugs. Cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, stroke, interpersonal intimacy, dating, violence, more distress, and we're discouraged from seeking help. So here's all the different costs of our masculinity, and I think it's definitely to our detriment. They talk about the mind and body being separate, but at least back in the day, it was like the mind and body are very separate, and if you're crazy, it's in your mind and that's not part of your body. So just deal with it, get over it. But the cost here is that being stressed out, being anxious, hypertension, it's directly linked to our body because it leads to alcoholism. It can lead to stroke and lead to heart disease. So all this mind and body separation don't really, in my mind, exist because your mind can kill your body very easily. So why separate the two? They're one. So when you treat your body, it's the same as treating your mind. And I think that this is one way to kind of get through this is if we have something going on inside our mind, we should look at it just like an ailment in our arm or our leg. Here's some examples, and feel free, anyone that can recognize all these people, because I don't recognize all of them, but I see Kurt Cobain, I see Robin Williams, I see Philip Seymour Hoffman, Chris Farley. Let's see, a lot of very famous people, Anthony Bourdain, that we've lost from mental health issues. And I just wonder if it wasn't for the stigma, where we'd be now. Did you have any identified ones, Kyle?
Well, I was going to comment. I do believe that's Ernest Hemingway, and third row down, right below Chris Farley.
Yeah.
He's a perfect example because he was kind of the perfect balance between this like really macho kind of guy, but also very sensitive. And, he was this passionate writer, but he had the image of being this, brusque man. I also think it's funny that to just comment about him, I'm a big fan, but he was obsessed with cats. And I think that's something that is something people don't always know about him is he loved his cats. And, some people always see like, men have dogs, women have cats. And I always thought that was something really, really spoke to his personality, his sensitivities, that he was able to, love these cuddly creatures so much, but be this like very, macho guy. And he struggled with that mental health his whole life, and it ultimately was his downfall, and he took his own life. but yeah, I just thought that was I wanted to kind of highlight that one because I think it speaks a lot to your stigma comments from earlier.
I think that's a great example. And I think as a man, I think it's great when you can find something like loving cats or not liking sports or something that kind of releases you a little bit from that trap. So it sounds like for him, loving cats was a way to kind of get away from just having to be so macho all the time. Great example. So let's talk about some of the options and some of the solutions, as we've already sort of been discussing through this, redefining what manhood is. Let's challenge these stigmas and let's look for some solutions. And I can also share even some anecdotes from some of the work I do with Meru. And last night, I even had a client that I wanted to share about, which was so interesting. He's just seemed like a typical man's man, bearded dude, just and I was asking him why he's been suffering for so long. Why have you why are you seeking out mental health right now after all this time? And he's like, it just wasn't cool. One of my friends finally got some therapy and I felt like maybe it was okay. So I think this is part of a way to challenge the stigmas. If we start to share a little bit that it's okay you can be a man, you can get therapy. And his draw to Meru actually was that some of the, and we'll talk a little bit about Meru later on too, is that it's not individual therapy where you're staring at another guy or a woman in the face all the time. You can kind of do it still on your own. So the nice thing about the new age after COVID is there's this fourth wave of therapy they talk about. There's ways to get help that's not just as intense as it might be. Even Freud, like the father of psychology, said that it was, the reason he had his little couch behind his clients, he had they would sit on a chair and he'd be behind them, is it was so intense to stare at them in the face all the time. So sometimes, as we challenge our masculinity and the stigma, it might be too intense to see a therapist face to face and deal with all that right away. Maybe we want to just tip our toes in the water a little bit, and instead of diving in for a giant therapeutic meal, we might want more of like a granola bar or an in-between meal. And that's where programs like Meru can come in, which still offer a form of therapy and treatment. And it's even cool. There's like biofeedback device, which is all, the guy that I did the intake with last night, he's like, this is cool. It's like a video game. You put this on your ear, you put this on your chest, and it measures your breathing rates and your heart rate variability. And it shows you if you're meditating very well, or if you're off the chart and you're stressing out. And it's like, I can look at that like a video game. And one of his issues was video game addiction, and you can sublimate that, you can challenge and funnel some of what is not working for us into what's working for us. And I think if we make manliness and therapy manliness, we can go far with it. So let's have a little Q&A now. And I appreciate you guys bearing with me and listening and opening it up a little bit. So here we go.
Yeah, so I'm going to open it up. Anyone that has joined, feel free to, I believe you should be able to unmute yourself. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak if you want, or just drop a question into the chat and I can ask it. Dr. Carbon, I have some questions that I can ask if nothing comes up from anyone.
Also, I haven't forgotten about the mindfulness eating. So if anytime you guys, either after the questions or before, whenever you guys want to do mindfulness eating, we can jump into that too.
Yeah, I say we I'm gonna get us started, maybe get us rolling with a question. I say we end the session with the mindfulness activity. A nice way to kick us off into the next phase of our day. If that sounds good to you.
Perfect.
Awesome. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I thought maybe you could expand on it. So should we think about caring for our mental health similarly to the way we care about physical health? I know you went into some examples of this, but can you just go into a little more detail about like what that means? How are those types of maintenance related? Things like that.
Yeah, great. And I think that's one of the great ways to get through this is to really look at the brain as any muscle or bone in our body, and our brains can get strained. In fact, there's even research that says that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they used to call that shell shock in the 50s. But like if you're at war, or if you're on the streets, or someone or if you even just think you're going to die and you have this traumatic experience, there's actual proof that it can change parts of your brain physically, and then therapy can fix that. So looking at the brain and mental health as a physical ailment, I think is a way to kind of take the stigma away. I think somehow we personalize our brain, and our brain becomes our personality, and we don't want to like admit that there's something off about it, because then it seems like it makes it worse. And it's so interesting, if you think about looking at it like a physical ailment. Look at diabetes. Diabetes is a physical ailment. Type 1 diabetes, I think, requires insulin on a regular basis to stay healthy. And if you treat it well, you can live a great life. Alcoholism follows almost the exact same numbers and trends. Alcoholism is often seen as a chronic illness with regular treatment, such as 12-step groups or being in therapy, and abstinence is usually the best method. You can have a normal life, but the relapse rate for diabetes and alcoholism is also really similar. A lot of people with alcoholism relapse and often die from the complications of alcoholism, and the same with diabetes. A lot of people with diabetes don't follow the diet and relapse and end up having neuropathy and eye problems and sometimes death. And it's the same. In my mind, it's the same. The rates are almost identical, and it's a physical ailment. So I just think if we look at mental health as a physical ailment, as a broken arm, and I think I wish our society could look at it that way, and it's not permanent. So like, let's say you have some depression or some anxiety and you go get therapy and you're done. It's not like you're any weaker. It's just like a broken arm. You had a broken arm, you got it taken care of. It's not like you wouldn't want to hire that employee because they had a broken arm one day and they're good now. I mean, it's so the stigma is, I'd love to get away from that stigma.
This question was not, I did not previously write this one down. This is off the cuff, if you will. Kind of going along that idea of physical ailment. I mean, and I'm no therapist, so Dr. Carbon, please, correct me and say this the right way, but isn't things like depression and stuff like that, that's literally like, that's a chemical, it's often traced to a chemical imbalance in the brain. And that's why sometimes, antidepressant, anti-anxiety meds are prescribed to help, balance all of that out in your brain. So why do you think it is that, because technically that's physical. I mean, your brain is a physical thing. The way your brain functions is all a physical thing. So why do you think it is that we haven't been able to, as men, maybe make that same connection through the rest of our physicality as it relates to our brain?
I love the question, and there's sort of two answers to it too. Sometimes your environment can make you depressed, and then the cure for it might be more environmental. And then sometimes it can be chemical. Sometimes you could have genetic depression where you've always had depression in your family, and then the cure would be more chemical. But the cool thing about the brain and the environment is they can still interact with each other and influence each other. So you can still have a chemical depression and do mindfulness and eat right and sleep well and kind of work through it. Or you can still have a environmental depression and take antidepressants and kind of deal with it. So there's two ways to cause it, and there's two solutions. And I just think whatever we can do to not suffer needlessly is probably the best solution. I think I think we want to be careful not to try to just tough it out, though. I think if you have a depression and you're not getting out of bed and you're thinking about, maybe you're having suicidal thoughts, even maybe you're not feeling hopeful about your future, don't try to tough that out. Go see go see a psychiatrist, even get on some antidepressants so that way you have the energy to maybe to go get therapy and look at the root of it, and maybe you can get off, you'll be able to get off the medication eventually. But I've seen people suffer with suicidal depression and still try to tough themselves out of it. And I'm like, if you kill yourself, that's a permanent answer for a temporary problem. And I love that quote, but suicide is a permanent solution for a temporary problem. And I don't want to get too dark with this presentation because I'm trying to lift everyone up and I don't want to end on these notes, but I mean, it's, there's so much hope out there. If we can just get over the stigma and the machismo of thinking that therapy is bad and that men have to be tough. I think that we can be tough in getting help, and even me, as a therapist, I had to go to a year of therapy to become a therapist at part of my schooling. And I went for 10 years. It took 1 year to realize that I needed it and 9 more years to use it. And it changed my life. I mean, it was the greatest gift I ever gave myself. So a little side disclosure there.
No, thanks for that. And I appreciate the perspective, and especially it's important to make note, we were talking about the chemical elements of it, but that depression can be circumstantial, can be environmental, and that I think a lot of people think of therapy and having, anxiety or depression or major stresses is that you have to take medicine to deal with it. And that's not always the case. And, it's something that the Mental Health Program also does, and we'll talk about that some more later, is it's teaching you practices and lessons and different skills that you can use to help enhance, the way you process emotions, the way you make sense of your mental health. And so I think sometimes that can be a barrier too, is this idea that like, oh, I have to get on medication to deal with this. And, for some people that's the case, and for some people it's not. And so I think it's an important perspective to remember.
I see a hand raised too.
Oh, very nice.
Hi, good morning. I have enjoyed the talk very much. This is very relevant. So I had a thought or this idea, like generally the perception in the society is that women are emotionally much stronger compared to men. I don't know if this is a reality or might be a stigma also, or maybe a truth to it. But is it like because of the toxic masculinity or patriarchy in the society or in different cultures, like historically men are less prone to keep in touch with their emotions as compared to women? Like is that also possibly going to cause in this situation of men being emotionally weaker because you're not keeping in touch with your emotions or like talking about it or addressing the emotional needs? uh, just a thought, like please give your comment.
I love the question. There's so much in there. And please jump in if I get it wrong, but so the part of the question is, are men emotionally weaker?
Yes.
Okay. I think one of the things is, I think men, they seek out therapy so less frequently. And we don't, it was almost like I ran into some research that was sort of showing that the rates of mental illness was lower for men. But from what I gathered, I think that's incorrect. I think that it's not showing up as high because we're not going to get help until we're suicidal, until our suicide rate's really high, until we have serious substance abuse issues. So it's almost like men look like we're cut off from this and we're not in touch with our emotions. And we only get there when it
goes critical, or
exactly. Yeah, we only get there when it's critical. We only get therapy when we can't get out of bed and we're losing our jobs. And I think women are able to access it a lot sooner.
That's also because of how the society is allowing or not allowing because of the toxic masculinity, or we are allowing ourselves not to. I mean, we are not allowing ourselves not to keep in touch with our emotions.
Completely agree. Because we are the society, right? I mean,
we are the society.
Is us.
Yeah.
We do it to ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah. Great question.
Thank you. It's a great talk.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point too. I think there's so much generational and cultural stereotypical just perspectives on mental health for men that we have to still overcome. Every generation tries to overcome the issues of the generation before it. And I think as a gender, men are still trying to get to that point where, for decades and decades, it wasn't a thing that men would do. You couldn't be perceived as weak. You couldn't be perceived in that way. You just had to be this stoic, everything's fine. I can do everything sort of perspective and personality. And, we have the benefit of our generation, it's culturally becoming so much more relevant just throughout the entire world. And especially since COVID, I think it's becomes at the forefront of people's minds as, oh, maybe I do need to take care of my mental health.
I love that you brought up culture too, just to add,
yeah.
Hopefully you don't mind that I jump in.
No, not at all.
Each culture, and I think almost every culture has its own bias against mental health. Like I know the term machismo is a Latinx kind of term, but I mean, I know like Asian cultures are very, there's stereotypically, you don't share your feelings, you kind of keep it to yourself. Things are very mechanistic. So I think, and I probably in the future that'd be a great thing for research. And I know there's a lot of research out there, but just how each culture has its own bias against, letting others into what's going on, and even seeing a therapist of a different culture. So I think culture is a big barrier as well.
I always think of The Sopranos when I think of mental health care and a very, strong, brusque guy getting therapy. I think Tony Soprano, and that show came out in the 90s and early 2000s, and even then, like that was 20 maybe 20 years ago, whatnot. It was like they looked down on him for doing that, like the other characters, and he had to keep it a secret even from like his family and everything. And I just think that's such a great example of exactly what we're talking about today.
Yeah, he was afraid he'd get whacked if it came that they'd found out that he was seeing a therapist. And I've seen that even in the clients that I work with at Meru, where oh, please don't put this in my chart. I don't want anyone to find out that I have anxiety.
Mhm.
And I know with HIPAA and with the laws, I mean, it's you'd have to work for like as a deep operative with the CIA before they'd even try to call into account your mental health records. And even then it still might be protected, but there's still this fear that I see, like, well, what if I try to apply it to a different insurance panel and they somehow can access this, and I won't be able to get my I won't be able to get these things. There's still this real concrete fear that if it comes out that I had anxiety or depression, that it'll hold me back in life. It's almost like I work with a lot of alcoholics, and a lot of alcoholics, the worst thing they don't want to have to admit that they're an alcoholic, because that makes it real. I'm down there. I'm not an alcoholic. I just drink a little bit too much. If I have to admit that I'm alcoholic, now I have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the idea that if you pretend that there's no problem, then it's nothing you have to worry about.
Dr. Carbon, I have one more question here I wrote down for you. I thought we could go into. So, you talked about how so often men will kind of wait till it's extreme to deal with something like their mental health issues. So can you kind of talk more about how men need to expand what they think of as mental health concerns? Not automatically, thinking that the most extreme scenario is the only thing that's a concern. Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's what we're talking about before, how the body can clue us in. I think that's a nice. I think as men we tend to be alexithymic is the 50-cent word. And alexithymic is a term for disconnection from your thymia. Alexia is your lexicon, so a disconnection from the ability to voice your feelings. Mad, glad, sad, afraid. I always go back to that, because when I started my own therapy, my therapist used to tell me, you're having a feeling it all the time. And I never believed that. And he's like, yeah, every moment you're feeling something. So I'm a little anxious and excited right now because I'm presenting. So we always have a feeling at all times. And to go back to your question, of how to clue into some of the physical aspects and ways to get help. I think if we look at our body, if you're feeling tension, if you're feeling anxiety, if you're having sleeping problems, if you find that this is addressing your question, right? Am I on point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you find that you're wanting to drink more, if you come home and you're snapping at your family members, a lot of times people go to GI doctors for GI, stomach issues, indigestion, and I always recommend, get a physical checkout too, because sometimes you could have hyper or hypothyroidism. And that can look like anxiety or depression, if your thyroid's overactive or underactive. So always get a medical workup. But if you go, and this is how sometimes I'll see clients at Meru, they'll come in and they'll say, I've seen 3-4 doctors, and no one has any reason for why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, but I just can't sleep, and my stomach and this and my shoulders are tense, and I'm having migraines or panic attacks. I have this sense. I had someone came in, they keep going to the ER. Every year they go to the ER thinking they're going to die, and there's nothing wrong with their heart. It's the anxiety. And I think that there's a wisdom in our bodies. I think our bodies tell us what they need sometimes. I think when your body is having these symptoms, it's your mind and body connection. Freud, I'll go back to Freud because I think he was the father of therapy. He said that your feelings serve as signal functions, right? They're signposts. So if you're anxious, if your stomach is hurting, if you're having tension, it's a stop sign or a go sign or a yield sign saying, hey, pay attention to this. My body's calling for help. Maybe it's time to look at a therapist. Maybe it's time to try meditation and mindfulness and some other programs.
Thank you for that. So I think at this point, I'm going to leave it open for any other questions or comments, but if there aren't any, I'm going to transition into talking a little bit about the Meru Health program, because we've really created a new treatment modality that we think is a good avenue for really everybody, but for men that are looking for a different way to kind of attend to their mental health. That's not traditional talk therapy or something it's a little more private and personal that might resonate more strongly. So
one more question.
Oh yeah, great.
Hey, one little question. So you have talked about how therapy is a good option to keep a good mental health. What other options would you say are also like something that we can try maybe in the daily routine, or one is meditation, but maybe you can share from your daily routines or something that can help with keeping up a good mental health?
Yeah. Okay, good question. Yeah, so and I look at therapy like the steak dinner, so yeah, a steak dinner if you're hungry is always an option. But I think Meru and some of these other, I don't consider Meru really individual therapy. It's more like a 12-week program where you work on and I think Kyle's going to talk about it. But mindfulness and meditation, journaling, eating well, sleeping well. And this is one cool thing about Meru is it kind of puts into a 12-week program all these different coping skills, I guess is the term for it. And in the coping skills, there's mindfulness and meditation, but there's also eating habits, there's setting boundaries, kind of journaling and looking at your core values. Even self-help books. I mean, I used to love to read, self-help books. Things like there's a lot of like interesting kind of, they call it cognitive behavioral therapy. And a lot of that you can do on yourself, like looking at we tend to do things like magnify negative things and minimize positive. And there's all these kind of thinking errors. If you look at the brain like a computer, our brains make a lot of little mistakes that make our life harder. And so we magnify negative and we minimize positive and we do all these little errors. And so I think in many ways you can become your own therapist. You don't necessarily have to spend $200 and an hour face-to-face therapy every week to improve your mental health. There's so many avenues. There's really cool apps too, like the Calm app and Headspace and multitudes of different sources online, both sort of from a do it yourself perspective, as well as with the guidance of a therapist, which is one of the advantages I think of like programs like Meru, where you have sort of a therapist in the background that's helping guide it. But you can, there's lots of sort of unguided solutions too. Even websites like Reddit and stuff, whereas if you kind of look at mental health and ways to improve mental health, I do think there's a lot of options. Even like smartwatches now, they have like HRV, like heart rate variability. Like there's ways to track your biofeedback. There's devices out there. But I think yeah, mindfulness, meditation, eating right, sleeping right, working on cognitive distortions, and 12-step, even 12-step work if you find that you have any sort of addiction, support groups, clubs, whatever you can do to kind of get more of a richer life. And even just talking to your partners, your friends, families, loved ones, sharing with them that you're a man that has feelings and that it's okay. I remember growing up, I was never into sports. And is that okay to be a man that's not into sports? I mean, I guess it is, so breaking that mold, and letting ourselves be a little bit more free, I think is one way to kind of deal with it too. So thank you so much for your participation.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, just anecdotally, I have to say that the two things that have helped me most manage my mental health have been focusing on my physical health, aside from like, making sure that I'm, doing all the right things, but just focusing on physical health and being communicative, being open about, being vulnerable and having emotions and how I'm feeling, it's done wonders. And so those are like my two main things that I focus on a daily basis to make sure my mental health stays at a good status quo.
As a psychologist, we always joke, if everyone was physically active all the time, antidepressants would be off the market.
Yeah.
If we all practice full physical routines, it would be gone. Should I advance to, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so let me talk just a little bit about what we can offer. And, Dr. Carbon, I really appreciate you kind of mentioning the different ways that people can find care, especially, there's so many different apps and digital companies like our own out there right now. And what's great about it is I've learned in working in this environment for a little over, for a while now, is that there's so many digital mental health solutions, but each one is getting at the issue and how the solutions are delivered in different ways. So they really are creating options for people, which is fantastic. And so I'm going to go a little bit into what we can offer, because it really, I think, kind of brings a complete balance to all the different types of care that you can receive. So everyone that comes into the Maru program starts off by going through our digital front door and registers through a HIPAA compliant and confidential platform. It's all in the app. You download the app and you get paired with your own dedicated therapist. That therapist will work with you through the entirety of our program, which is a 12-week. It goes for 12 weeks. It starts off, you have an intake video call with the therapist that is assigned to you. And that is I think it's a 45-minute to an hour-long conversation. It's, video in the app. And it's really one of the only times you're going to be talking in that way to your therapist. But they set up kind of like understanding your goals, understanding what your care plan trajectory is, and kind of the therapist really learns about you so they can tailor the experience to you. So each week, once you do that, you dive into the 12-week program. Each week focuses on different themes. They're delivered in audio and video lessons, and they're supported by your dedicated therapist almost on a daily basis, pretty much through the in-app texting. There's a text feature in there. You can send messages to your therapist whenever you want. They are human beings, so they're not going to necessarily respond 24/7. It's not like a bot or anything like that. But our therapists really try to focus on responding within 24 hours and having that kind of daily check-in and talking capability. And so that also helps because you get to receive continued messages throughout the journey. They check in to see how you're responding to the different lessons, pose questions to help you broaden your understanding of the subject matter, how you can apply it to your day-to-day life. And as our focus is on the mind and the body, these lessons really emphasize sleep and nutrition in addition to like CBT and mindfulness practices. It really brings a well-rounded experience in connecting elements of both physical and mental care. And the primary goal of the program is to teach you tools that you can use every day for the rest of your life to manage your mental health. One thing that Dr. Carbon mentioned earlier, and you can see it on the left-hand side of the wheel there, is the heart rate variability biofeedback device. This is something you get for free when you sign up and register. It gets delivered to you. It's a small device. You sync it via Bluetooth to your phone and you use it within the app. And it monitors the pace of your breathing and the fluctuations in your heart rate. So you can directly see like the scientific impact of calming your breathing, slowing your mind down, practicing something mindfully, and you see how your heart rate lowers and your body physically calms down. It's a really cool feature. We get a lot of great feedback on that from our participants. In addition to the lessons and the biofeedback device, all participants are put into an anonymous peer support group within the app where you can discuss, and I'll stress this again, anonymously, anything related to your care, the things you're learning, pose questions to others. It really creates an authentic, open discussion amongst others receiving care. And I think it's an element that helps continue decreasing that stigma while you're going through care, because you really recognize that there are other people going through the same things as you are. We do have a little video that we can play. Oh, and actually, yeah, so this is a quick little bit. This is all 12 of the weeks and the themes that are incorporated and the kind of things you'll be learning. There's more than 50 audio and video lessons. There's new stuff that comes out every day. And then each week, with the new themes, there's new lessons there. There's evidence-based practices. There's interactive groups. There's live webinars that you will be able to attend throughout, as you see fit. And it really is just, the best part is that you're getting this personalized guidance and help from a therapist for your care. It's not just tuning out and being on your phone. It's a little more interactive while still being private and personal. And so we have a little video, just kind of a little more directly goes through what this experience is. It's only about 2 minutes. So we'll play that and then close things out.
Awesome. Make it full screen.
Welcome to Maru Health, an online mental health care provider that offers an evidence-based program proven to reduce anxiety, depression, and burnout.
Doesn't look like it's showing video. That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Did we get the picture?
Well, if this...
Welcome to Maru Health, an online mental health care provider that offers an evidence.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any picture.
Well, that's weird. Well, this I will make sure to send the link out to this video so you can see it. But the video is just a probably more well-spoken iteration of what I explained about how our program works. So if you want to go back to the slides, Dr. Karpman, I'll talk a little bit about what the sign-up process would be like.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you learned about this webinar through your employer or your insurance provider, you have access to our program. So you can refer to benefit materials you receive from them, or any emails, something like that. You may have received specific information about how you can access Maru Health. If you do have it through your employer or insurance provider, you will have a dedicated website that you can visit to learn more and sign up. They provide an access code that gets you in the door per the terms of our arrangement with that employer or insurance provider. But it's super straightforward. You visit that site. If you're not sure what it is, you can visit maruhealth.com/enroll and search for yourself. But you visit your site, you download the app, plug in your access code that you receive. Sign up is all confidential and HIPAA compliant. You're immediately able to schedule your preliminary intake call with the therapist that is assigned to you. And you're getting started within a couple days. I think our average is about 2 to 3 days, but we like to say that within a week you will be receiving the care you're looking for. That's something that we really like to stress because access can be very difficult as it relates to mental health care, and we're able to get people in the door very, very quickly, so they don't have to delay the care that they need.
I just wanted to add too, just from like the intake I did last night, is I think it does help with the stigma. You're not, it's like you have a therapist, they're in the background, you have a group, it's anonymous, you kind of get to do it on your own, but with somebody. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. And I think that's, with Headspace and the Calm and there's a lot of different apps and stuff. There's a lot of ways to access mental health care that aren't as difficult with the stigma. We can kind of get around that stigma and at least get your foot in the door. And then, maybe one day in the future, then you can do more intense therapy if that's what you need. Or maybe, maybe just mindfulness and working on some coping skills is enough to get out of that suffering. So I like that there's more access.
Absolutely. Okay, and with that, I think that comes to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank everyone for participating and joining today. I really appreciate the participation. I think the back and forth and the discussion really helps add to the topic. And I think we really hope that you learn something from this. This video will be available to you after the fact. It will be sent out. So Dr. Karpman, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Back and forth. I appreciate you too.
No, yeah. And if there's, I'll leave it for a moment if anyone does have any questions or comments. Otherwise, Dr. Karpman, did you want to do the mindfulness activity real quick while we?
I'll switch it up, but let's see if we have any questions or comments. Any final? Okay, I think we're good. I think I'm going to just end it with a quick, one of my other favorite mindfulness activities. I like these little tiny coping skills. So this one's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is really fun. I think, which is a way of grounding ourselves. Maybe I should have done it before the presentation to help with any anxiety I have. But There's no real wrong way to do it. It's just, 5 things that you see in your room right now or see around you, or on the screen even. And I see Kyle, I see a poster on the wall. What are some things you might see, Kyle? Anything you see in your room?
I see my Dwight Schrute bobblehead on my desk.
I see my coffee. I see a banana. So those are things you see. What are some things that you can hear right now?
I can hear cars outside.
I hear my air purifier. I hear your voice. I heard my chair creak. Some things that you touch right now. I can touch my table.
My lens cloth.
I feel my body in the chair. So it's like 5 things you can see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you touch, 2 things you can smell. I smell my coffee.
Coffee.
Yes, and I can taste water and coffee, and that's just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's no wrong order for it. It's just a nice way to sort of ground ourselves. And then I like to just end with taking a nice deep breath. And I find that when I do these things, I'm less anxious. I just want to thank everyone for being here. This was great. So
thank you, Dr. Karpman, and thank you all for attending. Like I said, this will be available to you afterwards. It will be emailed out. Please take what you learned today and have a fantastic rest of your day and week.
thank you.